There is a wall in Milan that has been dying since the year it was finished. For over 500 years, people have stood in front of it convinced it was hiding something, and for over 500 years, they were staring at the wrong layer entirely. Because what almost nobody talks about is this. Most of what you're looking at when you see the Last Supper today isn't even paint that Leonardo da Vinci touched. It's guesswork. It's repair. It's centuries of other people's hands trying to save a dying idea. And in the last few years, something new has entered that story. Not a new coat of paint, not another restoration, but an artificial intelligence trained to see patterns no human eye has ever been able to hold in its head at once. What it found in the damage, in the parts everyone had already written off as ruin, is the reason you're watching this video right now. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at that painting completely differently. To understand why this matters, you have to understand who Leonardo actually was, because almost nothing about him fits the image people carry around of a polished Renaissance master. He was born in 1452 in a small hill town in Tuscany, and he was born illegitimate. His father was a notary with real social standing, his mother was a peasant, and the two never married. In 15th century Italy, that single fact locked most doors before he ever reached them. He couldn't inherit his father's profession. He couldn't take the normal path into university, into law, into the world of Latin and formal scholarship that defined the educated elite of his time. He was, by the rigid standards of his era, a boy who technically didn't belong in the rooms he would later dominate. That exclusion ended up shaping everything about how his mind worked. With no tutors handing him inherited answers, no ancient authorities to simply quote and repeat, he had exactly one teacher: direct observation. And he pursued it obsessively. Across his lifetime, he filled somewhere in the range of 13 to 20,000 pages with notes, diagrams, and studies. Not idle doodles, but dense engineering and anatomical work that in some cases predicted inventions by centuries. He drew a design for a human-powered flying machine long before anyone seriously believed flight was possible. He sketched an armored vehicle with cannons mounted around its circumference, a rough ancestor of the tank, roughly 300 years before anything like it existed on a real battlefield. He drew concepts for underwater breathing devices and a screw-like mechanism meant to lift itself through the air, a distant ancestor of the helicopter rotor. None of this came from books. It came from watching birds bank in the wind, watching water curl around obstacles, and dissecting human bodies to understand how muscle actually pulls on bone. He referred to himself in his own notebooks as a man without letters, uneducated, self-taught, outside the formal system. And crucially, he didn't write that with shame. He wrote it like a badge of honor. His entire intellectual identity was built on trusting what he could personally verify over what respected authorities simply claimed was true. That instinct, trust your own eyes, question the official account, is the single thread that connects his engineering notebooks to the story we're about to get into. Here's the other piece you need. If you've ever seen a page from Leonardo's actual notebooks, you've probably noticed the handwriting looks backwards, mirrored right to left, so that it only becomes legible when held up to a mirror. Historians debate why. Some point out he was left-handed, and writing this way kept his hand from smearing wet ink across the page. Others think it was simply habit. But whatever the original reason, the practical effect is the same. A man who writes everything in reverse has made his private thoughts inconvenient for anyone to read by accident. And he lived in an era where certain ideas were genuinely dangerous, to say plainly. This was the world that would later put Galileo under house arrest for insisting the Earth moved, a world where challenging the Church's account of nature could end a career or a life. A mind like Leonardo's, hungry for direct observation, skeptical of inherited authority and fluent in encoding his own thoughts, was operating inside a system that did not reward that kind of independence being spoken aloud. Now put that mind in front of the biggest, most public commission of his career. Around 1495, the Dominican friars of the monastery of Santa Maria del Grazie in Milan commissioned Leonardo to paint the far wall of their dining hall, their refectory, the room where monks ate their meals together in silence. The subject was the moment Christ tells his 12 apostles that one of them is about to betray him, and the wall itself is enormous, about 15 feet tall and nearly 30 feet across. Leonardo finished it around 1498, and it's genuinely not an exaggeration to call it the most scrutinized image in the history of art. For 5 centuries, people have leaned into that wall, studying every face and every hand, certain it was hiding something more than a dinner scene. Here's the part almost nobody fully absorbs, though. They were staring at a painting that was already, in large part, gone. A proper fresco is painted into wet plaster, and the pigment chemically bonds with the wall as it dries, which is why frescoes can last for centuries. But true fresco demands speed. You have to finish each section before the plaster sets, with no going back to soften an edge or rework a shadow. Leonardo's entire artistic identity was built on the opposite of speed. He wanted to return to passages again and again to build that famous smoky, dissolving quality, where outlines seemed to melt into shadow. So instead of painting into wet plaster, he sealed the dry wall and painted on top of it in layers, treating the wall like a canvas he could keep revisiting. It gave him the control he wanted. It also meant the paint never truly bonded with the surface. It just sat there. And it began failing almost immediately. Within about 20 years, while Leonardo was still alive, visitors were already describing paint flaking away. Then the centuries piled on. The refectory was a working dining hall, filled with steam and smoke from an adjoining kitchen for generations. In 1652, someone widened a doorway directly through the base of the wall, slicing straight through the lower portion of the composition and destroying the feet of the central figure. In 1796, Napoleon's troops were quartered in the building, and by some accounts soldiers used the room for target practice, damaging the surface further. In 1943, an Allied bombing raid partially destroyed the building. The wall itself survived by chance, but the roof above it was gone, leaving the painting exposed to rain and cold for roughly 3 years before it could be properly protected again. By the time conservators tackled a major, decades-long restoration that concluded at the end of the 20th century, the estimate that emerged was sobering. Some experts believe as little as 20 to 30% of what you see today is actual paint Leonardo applied with his own hand. The rest is loss, later overpainting, and educated reconstruction by other artists trying to guess what he originally intended. That restoration wasn't really about making the painting beautiful again. It was closer to archaeology, carefully removing centuries of other people's additions to find whatever original fragments still clung to the wall underneath. And this is exactly where the story turns, because it means that for 500 years, everyone searching this painting for secrets was searching the wrong layer. They were reading a surface that had already been chewed apart by doorways, soldiers, bombs, and well-meaning repainting. If there was ever anything more deliberate buried in that wall, it almost certainly wasn't sitting in the part visible to the naked eye. It would have to be underneath, in a layer no human eye could access without help. That's where modern imaging technology comes in, and this part is completely real, not speculative. Conservators studying the Last Supper have used tools like infrared reflectography and multispectral or hyperspectral imaging for decades now. Infrared light passes through the upper layers of paint as though they were faintly translucent and bounces back off the underdrawing, the sketch Leonardo laid down before applying any color at all. This lets researchers see his first thoughts: a hand repositioned an inch to the left, an arm reworked, a pose abandoned and replaced. Hyperspectral imaging goes further, capturing the same surface across hundreds of narrow wavelength bands, far beyond what human vision can register, revealing subtle differences in how pigment and plaster behave that are invisible under ordinary light. Together, these tools let conservators see structure hiding beneath centuries of damage, not by removing the ruin, but by looking straight through it. This is the point where I want to be completely upfront with you because it matters. In recent years, AI systems trained on huge datasets of an artist's work have started to be used in art analysis, spotting brushstroke patterns, flagging areas of loss versus original material, and helping conservators prioritize where to look closer. It's a genuinely exciting frontier, and it's part of why interest in AI plus The Last Supper has exploded online. But I want to be honest with you about where verified science ends and internet storytelling begins. There is no confirmed, peer-reviewed discovery of a hidden spiral message, encoded in mirror script, spelling out secret phrases about truth and betrayal, arranged along the golden ratio across this specific wall. That version of the story, the one that circulates in viral videos claiming a machine read buried sentences near Judas and Peter and Thomas, is a piece of speculative storytelling, not an established finding. I'm telling you this not to kill the fun, but because the real story is compelling enough on its own, and because a channel that blurs the line between imaginative and this actually happened is doing its audience a disservice. So let's talk about what makes this speculation so magnetic in the first place, because that's worth understanding even if the specific hidden spiral claim isn't verified fact. Leonardo really did spend his life encoding things. He really did write backwards. He really did believe, as far as we can tell from his own notebooks, that direct observation was more trustworthy than inherited authority, a genuinely dangerous idea to hold too loudly in his era. And the painting really was built with a level of mathematical structure that historians and art theorists have documented for centuries. Careful use of linear perspective converging on Christ's head, deliberate spacing of the apostles into groups of three, proportional relationships that echo the kind of geometry Leonardo obsessed over elsewhere in his notebooks, including his famous fascination with spiral growth patterns in shells and the proportions of the human hand. None of that is invented. It's exactly why the idea of a deeper hidden message feels so plausible. It's built on a foundation of real, documented obsessions this specific man actually had. What AI genuinely offers here, in real and responsible use, is scale. A human conservator can spend a career studying one wall and still not hold every wavelength band, every micropattern of paint loss, every geometric relationship in their head simultaneously. A machine learning model trained on Leonardo's surviving notebooks, the actual 13 to 20,000 pages of drawings, mirrorscript notes, and geometric studies, can be used to compare stylistic fingerprints against the scanned data from the wall at a scale no individual researcher could manage alone. That's a legitimate and growing area of digital art history. Whether that kind of analysis will one day surface something as dramatic as a deliberate hidden text is genuinely unknown. Nobody, including me, gets to claim that answer today. So here's where I land, and where I think you should land too. The verified history of this painting is already one of the most remarkable survival stories in art, a work that started dying the moment it was finished, that was sliced through by a doorway, shot at by soldiers, nearly destroyed by a bomb, and still, after all of that, kept enough of its original structure that modern imaging can pull Leonardo's first pencil-thin decisions back out of the wall 500 years later. That part is true, documented, and honestly stranger than most of the internet legends built on top of it. The idea of a hidden spiral message is a story worth sitting with as a thought experiment, precisely because Leonardo was exactly the kind of mind who might have tried something like it, but it's a story, not a settled discovery, and I'd rather tell you that clearly than let a claim like that travel as fact. Here's what I want to leave you with instead of a fake reveal. Leonardo da Vinci built his entire life around one radical belief: trust what you can verify yourself, and be deeply skeptical of anything you're simply told to accept. It feels almost fitting and a little ironic that the internet's favorite version of his story, right now, is exactly the kind of unverified claim that same philosophy would have told him to question. So I'll ask you directly instead of pretending I have the answer. If new AI-assisted scanning does eventually confirm something genuinely new hidden in that wall, would that change how you see the painting? Or is part of what makes The Last Supper so powerful the fact that we will never fully know how much of it we've already lost? Tell me what you think in the comments, and let me know which real, verified art mystery you want unpacked next.